Hey darlings, I just wanted to make a video for you. It's late, I'm super tired, but today was another one of those, well, not today, I think I had a lovely day with you today. We did story, we listened to music that told a story, Piano Man, and Luca's My Name is Luca by Suzanne Vega. I enjoyed today with you, and we exercised. I'm gonna be so sore tomorrow, holy cow. I am out of shape. Those squats are gonna kill me tomorrow morning, if I can get out of bed at all. I enjoyed today with you. I wish we'd spent more time together. I like playing categories with you as well. And when watching the dog videos, that was nice. I can't wait to have a dog. Oh, I can't wait. It feels so important for us as a family. But then you guys went to bed and your dad fell asleep on the couch, and I gotta start reading the news, but I just had that horrible feeling of panic about this moment we're in and realizing that there isn't any way to make peace with not being a part of your lives, with the thought of leaving you. You're too amazing to comprehend not being around. And I think it'd be foolish for me to pretend that I could make peace with not having that option to be around you and witness you growing up and existing, because you're absolute magic, you are. And I want to be there to love you the way that you deserve to be loved, which is just with everything anybody could ever muster. I'm not good enough to give you the love you need. Nobody is. But I want to try, and I want you to be around people who also want to try. That feels really important, but I don't know if any of us are up to it. If any of us are up to giving you what you deserve. But I am going to try. I'm going to try my best. So I was worried that I would make a video, like I am right now, of me just having a wee panic attack, and trying not to because I don't want to stress out, because that can be fatal as well. But what I want to do is I want to share with you some books. I'm going through all these notes that I have, and I realized that I think the thing that makes me feel craziest about the idea of not being around for you guys is I've had a life that's taken me a lot of different places and given me a lot of different experiences. And you'll notice that, like when we're doing homeschool, I tend to have these ideas. Let's try this, let's do this, let's listen, just ideas. And I think that comes from having been in so many different situations where I either had to translate what was being said to fit me because I was the only one in the room, or it just comes from having a life that required an imagination to feel sane. Quite an imagination. Sorry, this is on my screen. But I feel lucky now for that. It's also been a source of horrible torture in my imagination. Like tonight, imagining the worst possible happening and us not being together. But for the most part, my imagination has created things that I want to share with you. I want to continue sharing with you, because you'll do something and a memory will come to me, and I'll be able to see a way to translate that to something that you can be a part of. So anyway, I was going through all these papers tonight, and I found this list of books that I want you to turn on to at some point. They're books that, I don't know if I want to say they changed my life yeah, I suppose they did. I mean, every book changes your life in some way or another, right? Even if it just provides a temporary escape from things you can't deal with or don't want to, or even the books you don't remember, I think, have the potential to change your life in some small way that matters. But I have this bookshelf of books that I want you to read, and I'm going to add to it, of course, as time goes on, and I remember more. I noticed that Harry the Spy isn't on here, but it should be, because, yeah, I loved reading that with you, Adahi. I must have read it 30 times in my life, but reading it with you, there's certain things that when you rewatch them or re-listen to them or reread them, you're like, the person I was then needed this and found deep meaning in this, but the person I am now squints a bit. Harriet the Spy isn't one of those. Every time I read it, I feel like I get it, and I'm seeing something new, and the same kind of excitement to be a part of her story is there, is present. Anyway, I'm gonna front myself up even more and read some of the books from this list. Some of them, a lot of these books came from a period in my life where I was really, where I was a young white activist. I was never a young white activist, but I hung out with a lot of young white activists, and I think a lot of my reading reflects, we were all reading the same thing. And there wasn't a lot of writing that was pro-black at that period of time. The 90s was this really great time to be alive. And we were so excited, us Gen Xers, to connect and communicate and discover the differences between waking life and dream life. And I think on some level, it was almost like for the privileged enough to be able to kind of push it aside for a second or for a night or for a weekend. Race was a heaviness that would have inhibited certain conversations, would have kept them from happening. I think I might regret saying that, but it seems true at the moment that I had all these wonderful conversations that open up these new passages of thought and understanding, and they wouldn't have existed had race been on the table between us. And in some ways I regret that I couldn't have relationships that were fully fleshed enough for me to be a black woman in them. That's a regret I have. And instead of saying but, I'll just say and. I also had a lot of amazing conversations in the 90s and the early aughts. Anyway, so these books came out of a period of time where everyone I knew had Whole Earth catalog, vintage editions. Everyone had a subscription to Utne magazine. Everyone either was part of or ordered from a CSA, Community Supported Agriculture, where you grow your own food, and for a small fee people can get a subscription to your basket of fresh yums from the garden with recipes and little quotes about how radishes can change your life. And we all liked being alive together and being tribe together. So it was a really interesting period of time. I think I must have worked on 5 organic farms during that period of time. And I think the books that are on this list reflect that. But again, I'm going to be doing this more and more because there's 1,000 books I want to recommend. But these books are kind of, a lot of them are from that period of time. So the first book is No Logo, which is a book by young activist Naomi Klein. Well, she's not young anymore, but at the time she was. And the book was kind of about how corporations brand things in a way that basically takes culture, it observes youth culture and the culture of the young, steals it from them and puts $1 million price tag on it and then sells it back to them by convincing them that if they don't have this label on what they already were, they're not really living, they're not really, part of the community and part of the zeitgeist that's happening around them. And the second book is kind of in a similar vein. I think both of these books were really touted by the magazine Utne, which was a really important magazine at the time. It was kind of this Scandinavian take on current events and modern culture, and this kind of anti-corporate magazine. And they would have these book recommendations, and I would religiously get the magazine and write down all the things they recommended, and then go to Borders or Barnes and Nobles and sit there and read all the books because I couldn't afford them. But the other book was Culture Jam. That was definitely, I think that was one of the contributors to Utne, Callie Lasson. And that book was also about how corporations keep a close eye on what the young are doing, even the very young, and then steal their ideas and then sell them back in shiny new colors with really good music that has nice hooks and make you feel like, if I don't look like this, like I was already looking before they stole it, then I'm not part of the youth culture around me. I'm not really living. So Culture Jam and No Logo, those were kind of books in the same vein. The book Living on the Earth, I feel like that's a bit of an older one. I almost feel like it was around when I was a kid, but It's called Living on the Earth by Alicia Bay Laurel, and this book is like the essence of who I was then. It's just a book with hand drawings, really basic drawings. All of you draw better than these drawings, but they're basically drawings on how to live simply on the earth, how to make a certain, like a peasant blouse, and how to plant food that will sustain you, that will give you most of the nutrients you need, and just really simple kind of life manual. And I love that book. The drawings are so simple and basic that it makes me feel this kind of simplicity, and it reminds me of my own childhood, because my parents had this kind of lovely simple approach. You know, my mom especially was really into basic health and growing your own food and having a garden that you could eat from. And I think the book just reminds me of that kind of ideology, which is kind of, a lot of my books do that. On the Road by Jack Kerouac. I'm going to come back to this several times because there's no way I can talk about it in a few minutes, but it's going to be its own video probably. But as quickly as I can summarize, On the Road is a manifesto of exuberant, hipster, goofiness. In the book, all the characters are really vulnerable and raw and sometimes embarrassed by their own existence and their own awkwardness. They're all a bit awkward at times, but they're just so damn glad to be there and to have jazz to listen to and have your mind blown by, and to have girls that will look at you and hold your hand and, you know, unfortunately, because it was the 40s, support you as you kind of just faffed about being an artist and a writer. But the book is just full of exuberance, and it's stream of consciousness, which is kind of a Jack Kerouac thing, trademark, where he writes as things are happening, and he doesn't just write in these kind of proper sentences that we're taught to write in, but he writes feelings and thoughts and sounds that you think and feel. You know, we're always telling you to stop making these crazy sounds that just seem to erupt from you like Tourette's, these sounds of excitement, and, you know, Jack Kerouac wrote like that. Like, he wrote in howls of misery and screams of despair, and he wrote long gazes of hopelessness and big goofy smiles of fingers crossed. Will she look at me? Like, he didn't write words. He just told what was happening, not just in the world around him, but in his own head and heart. It's brilliant. There's problems with these books based on when they're written. You know, you might be jolted by the use of the term Negro, but that was the term used back then. And he has the white man's way of kind of treating people of color like background material, like we are there to inspire whiteness and to encourage whiteness to be grateful to be alive. But there's bigger themes in that book that have always caught and held me, and it's one of those books that I've never really been able to dismiss as I've grown into my blackness. It's still held on to me, and it's still held me in thrall for different reasons. Steppenwolf by Herman Hesse. Steppenwolf is one of the books that I first turned your father onto, that made us close, that kind of encouraged our friendship, because I liked it, I dug it. And I know that I read about Herman Hesse from some other hippie book that recommended it, that said that Herman Hesse was kind of like one of those books that all the hippies read because he tapped, like Narcissus and Goldman, which is one of the books on the list, Narcissus and Goldman. It was kind of like this childlike Goldman meeting this, or no, childlike Narcissus meeting this kind of aesthetic named Goldman, who is more about rules and responsibilities, and Narcissus is more about freedom and beauty, and it was kind of this hippie manual. So I read about Herman Hesse reading about hippies, and this is what hippies read, so I wanted to read it. But Steppenwolf isn't really a hippie book. It's more of a, I want to say more beatnik, but it's a bit more tortured than I would imagine a hippie would like. But it's about madmen, and it's about, I don't want to give it away. It's a great book. And you should ask your dad about it if you get the chance, because it really blew his mind, and he should reread it to see if he can remember why. Another book is My Name is Chellis Glendinning, and I'm in Recovery from Western Civilization. It's really hard to find that book. I think I had to special order it from Barnes & Nobles or Borders or something. I have to reread it, but I know that my deep love of nature and my kind of anarcho-primitivism, this book taps into that idea. And you mentioned it the other day, Adahi, when we were doing the imagination meditations, when you were saying if you could kind of make the world a better place, you'd go back to before humans. This book kind of taps into the idea that we are separated from nature in a way that causes PTSD, and that only if we come back into contact with nature in meaningful, powerful, substantial ways can we really be healthy and happy and whole. And I still feel that way, but then I definitely felt that way. Like, my body would ache if I were in a building for too long. I couldn't breathe inside spaces. I had moved to California and Hawaii, and then I moved back, and the week I moved back, I couldn't sleep in a house. I felt crazy. I went to Cunningham Falls and I slept in my car outside, and then eventually was brave enough to sleep in a sleeping bag down by the water. The first time I did that, I woke up to fishermen staring at me, which kind of freaked me out, because humans are more scary than just sleeping in the woods at night. But the book was really a part of that moment of time where I felt like I couldn't be separated from nature for too long without feeling like I was dying inside. I miss that. I miss that feeling. I'm lucky we live in a place where I have access to it. I've never really been happy in places where I don't. Next book, Dharma Bums. Jack Kerouac again. Dharma Bums for me was even more exciting than On the Road, because Dharma Bums took place in the West, and there's so many descriptions of nature, and there's these big beautiful hikes, and J.F. Ryder is one of the main characters in the books. J.F. Ryder in real life was Gary Snyder, who was such a nature boy through and through, and didn't just have fun in nature, but understood nature and lived his life in it as like a fire watcher and a mountain goat, basically. And yeah, Dharma Bums is a bit more nature based and a bit more hippie than On the Road, which is a lot more beatnik, a lot less grubby. The Alphabet versus the Goddess, that's a nonfiction book that kind of describes the introduction of reading and language, written language, and how it changed the way we saw the world from a non-linear perspective to a more linear perspective. And there's some great passages in there. There's a passage in there about a man being told that a mark on a page was a lion, and he leaps up screaming because he's terrified. He thinks, how have you put a lion on a page? But it's just the word lion. But because he doesn't understand what language is, when the man says, that's lion, and points to the page, he freaks out thinking that he's about to be attacked, because he knows lions to be these terrifying creatures, you know? That's a really interesting passage in that book. But it also has to do with how language changed things from a matriarchal kind of perspective to a patriarchal one. It's a really good book. Leonard Shlain, he writes a couple of other books that are worth reading. Leonard Shlain. Sorry, I feel like I'm talking really fast, and I'll write these down so you can see the names of them. I have a triptych by Tom Robbins. Tom Robbins is an absolute acid trip. He's just magical. And I think I was saying at the beginning of the video, I've had so many kind of different lives and lived in so many places, and each place required a different me, a different self. And I feel lucky that I can kind of be different selves and still feel like myself at the end of the day for the most part. And Tom Robbins opened up a magical self that I needed so much, coming off of like years of depression and feeling trapped and crazy. And, you know, Tom Robbins opened up all these magical passageways with just delight and just, I can't even describe it. It's just, he writes magically, and he writes these unbelievable characters and beauty and whimsy. Oh, he's so whimsical, and it's just delightful. And then he brings this wisdom in, and this, you feel like you're reading some other world, this utopian world of people that, yeah, Tom Robbins. So the 3 books of his that I love are Another Roadside Attraction, Jitterbug Perfume, and Skinny Legs and All. Those are the 3 that I recommend from Tom Robbins. I love those. Franny and Zoe by J.D. Salinger might be consistently one of my top 3 books of all time. It is one of my goals to write a black Glass family. That the family in Salinger's books, their last name is Glass, and I would love to write a black Glass family. Franny and Zoe it's just such a good book. It's the characters are so clever and knowledgeable, and they're geniuses. They were all child geniuses, and their wit is so just on it and sharp and cutting, and they see things. But the beauty for me is that they see themselves seeing things. They have this perspective that's able to pull back and laugh at themselves and roll their eyes at themselves as they roll their eyes and see themselves seeing other people. And that's a really hard thing to capture, is pulling far back enough to write how you're writing and what you're feeling when you're writing. And it's just an incredible book. I could not recommend it. I feel like everyone I've ever known, I've recommended that book and Geek Love. I always recommend Geek Love, which is twisted and weird and uncomfortable making. I won't describe Geek Love that much to you, except to say that when I wrote it, or when I read it, I lost about 7 pounds because I couldn't eat while I was reading it. It made me feel nauseous. It's a really troubling, wonderful book. Geek Love. So Franny and Zoe and Geek Love are really high fiction recommends. But all the authors so far are white authors. It was a period in my life, I think, where most of the writers that I read were white. Also, I think I've always struggled because I grew up around white people, and I knew the potential for hatefulness and racism that seems almost inevitable. I think I maybe know the 5 people in the world that don't struggle constantly with having to unpack vile thoughts and racism. But I think I struggled with dealing with race because it was every day, it was a part of my life, dealing with racism. And so unfortunately it made me distance myself from my blackness because the pain was so in front of me all the time that reading about people of color, and it's not inaccurate to say that a lot of writing by black authors focuses on black struggle and black suffering, as it should. These are the lives that white supremacy has foisted upon us. But a lot of the writing by black authors dealt with our suffering and our struggle and our accomplishments and our achievements as well. But I feel like I was living too much in the reality of white supremacy and white oppression to invest more anger and more sorrow in my reading list. I read to escape, and unfortunately I didn't at that point find a lot of black authors that allowed me to escape. Now I can't read a lot of the books that help me escape because I want to read black authors now, and I want to focus on my own blackness and growing in it and reveling in it. But to be honest, the book about blackness that I want to read most, I haven't written yet, so I need to get to that. I want to tell you some black authors that I want you to read. And these are authors that I want you to read everything they've written. James Baldwin, read everything he's written. He is one of the most perfect human beings you will ever encounter. He was a gay black man in a time when being black was it just invited oppression and abuse, and being gay doubled up on that. And if you were gay, you got hatred from all communities, including black communities. And so for him to not just survive who he was, but to turn who he was into this magical, unapologetic, unashamed art is, wow. If I could go over again, I would have named one of you Baldwin, hands down. He's brilliant. Alice Walker, read everything she's written. She's amazing. Possessing the Secret of Joy moved me outside of myself. Everything she's written, read it all. Everything Alice Walker's written. Alice Walker is such, and Toni Morrison as well. Those women were both so unapologetically black and so unashamedly pro-black that it's just, they can do no wrong in my mind, really. I agree with almost everything they say. So Alice Walker, Toni Morrison, James Baldwin, Bell Hooks, Ta-Nehisi Coates. He's a more modern author. Read Zora Neale Hurston. Read Cornel West. He can be problematic sometimes, but read him anyway. Modern Jason Reynolds, you already love his books. He's a black author that I'm really excited to read. Audre Lorde. Audre Lorde helped me come to terms with my queerness. Read all of Audre Lorde's books. Sister Outsider, Call Me By My Name. She writes about being a black queer woman, which was, equally as challenging. I have a lot more black authors I'll come by. I feel like that should be a whole second video. Really quick, because I'm at 25 minutes already. The other books that I want you to read, The Little Prince, which I'm sure you've already read, but The Little Prince is one of those rare childhood books that is basically a book of philosophy that is for adults as equally as it is for children. There isn't anything childish about that book, and there isn't anything grown up about that book. It's just a perfect book of good philosophy, and it's got a bit of angst in it. It's got a bit of suffering and melancholy in it, but also this beautiful imagination. It's such a well-written children's book. All the Shel Silverstein books, definitely read him. He was a beatnik. He hung out with the beatnik Shel Silverstein. He did a music video with them. Pull My Daisy, I think he was in that one. But Shel Silverstein also has that way of capturing childhood in a way that doesn't speak down to children, you know? He believes that children are as wise as anybody, and they are, you guys especially. Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance is one of those, it's one of those books in the hippie canon. All hippies have this book on their shelf. And it talks about, it's kind of, even though it's a book that hippies love, it also kind of insults hippies a bit and kind of pulls their head out of the clouds and tries to get them to put their feet on the ground and be a part of a very real world and not just, you know, drift off in love and hugs, but to realize that life needs your attention to detail. And it isn't just about, it's called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, and he's talking about how to, well, one of the overarching themes is, in order to feel the wind on your face as you ride your motorcycle, you have to know how to fix your motorcycle when it breaks down. And that's kind of the theme that runs through the book, is in order to have these beautiful, meaningful experiences, you have to know how to sort the bare bones of things and not transcend details, because, you'll come crashing down at some point. Cyrano de Bergerac. I found it at Wonder Book and Video. I know the story of it. It's like been made into a movie, Roxanne, and it's basically a story about this guy with this incredibly long nose. It's just laughably long, and how he falls in love, and he pretends to be somebody else in order to get the girl. And so he has this very handsome man read his words, and the girl falls in love with the handsome man, which is heartbreaking because he's the one saying these words. But he doesn't believe that she'll love him if she sees his horrible nose. But the book is full of this amazing monologue. Oh my goodness. I want to read it right now. I hope we can read it together one day. But Cyrano de Bergerac, full of all this amazing dialogue, really good monologues in it. Into the Wild by Jon Krakauer. Jon Krakauer is an amazing writer. He writes kind of documentaries on these little stories that have happened. He's always worth reading. I recommend everything. He writes Into Thin Air. He writes the one about the town in Missoula, A Tale of Two Cities or something. But Into the Wild became this moment in culture. The book is about this kid who's just kind of sick of mainstream living. And I think he comes from a pretty decent family with money, and he decides that he has to go into nature to be free and to find who he is. And so he decides to go to Alaska and see if he can survive on his own. And so the book is called Into the Wild because he goes into the wild. And I don't want to ruin it for you, but there's a movie and everything. It's a real story. And so it became this cultural moment. And even now, I was reading just the other day, this book must be 15, 20 years old. And just the other day, I was reading about how kids still go to the bus that he lived in Alaska just to see what it was like for him. But it's a good book, Into the Wild. That's all I have for now. Like I said, there's 1,000 more that I'm going to recommend. But anyway, I just want to share this with you. I feel like I could make a video every 5 seconds about things that I want to share with you, but that's my share for tonight. And yeah, I'll take some more quiet moments this weekend, and these videos go a long way in making me feel calmer about what's happening around us. It's no good if I live in this constant fear of stress, of losing you or of you losing me. I can just say the things that I want to say and tell you I love you in the ways that I want you to feel and know for the rest of your life, whether or not I'm around. Okay, that's me, babies. I love you loads. I look crazy tonight. I look like a winter hobo. Anyway, I love you, babies. Have a good night. I'm going to post this on our YouTube channel. These videos are all over the place. Some are written for you, maybe at the age you are now, and some are written for you as you're older, but I think that you should listen to them all now. And maybe some of the stuff will sink in, maybe some of it won't, but yeah. It's good to take in things that you won't yet understand, because then you can be excited about getting them one day, something to look forward to. That's why I read all adult books when I was a kid. I couldn't wait to understand what I was reading. Anyway, I love you, babies. And yeah, see you in the morning.